Would you like to sit courtside at the NBA Finals for $30 from your living room? Well, special guest technology expert John Miley from the Kiplinger Letter joins me to discuss what the future holds for augmented and virtual reality technology, what companies stand to benefit, and what the impact may be on consumers and the economy. Welcome to Investor in the Family Radio, a podcast about learning to invest. My name is Brian Bain, and I'm your host. At Investor in the Family Radio, we believe that every dollar and minute we spend is an investment in something. And together, we want to make the best investments that we can. So thank you so much for joining us. Remember, our goal is to help you learn to invest financially and in all of life. You can always find more at investorinthefamily.com and subscribe to the podcast at the iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play Store. And as always, if you would like detailed show notes from today's episode, simply text the word Family Notes, one word, Family Notes, to the number 44222, or simply go to investorinthefamily.com and sign up for the list there, and we'll be sure to get you taken care of. Do you like shopping for insurance? Of course you don't. It can be a terrible experience, especially when it comes to life insurance. If you have loved ones that you want to take care of financially after you're gone, then you may want to consider term life insurance, and Policy Genius is the easiest way to get insurance, period. At Policy Genius, you can figure out what you need, compare the top policies, get covered, and save. If you want to save on term life insurance, go to investorinthefamily.com/policygenius. That's investorinthefamily.com/policygenius for access created specifically for Investor in the Family listeners. I do get a small commission if you use my link, which costs you nothing. It's a win-win. Visit investorinthefamily.com/policygenius for more info and have the most enjoyable insurance shopping experience you've ever had. And I hope you enjoyed today's show with John Miley. Well, hey, John, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. An honor to have you here with us. And we had a great discussion recently about 5G technology and what's coming, what that may mean for investors and companies connected to it. And now we want to talk about augmented and virtual reality, which has been something that obviously, people have been talking about more and more in recent years than on the augmented side. The big Pokemon Go craze from a few months ago has been big. So what can you tell us about where the industry is right now when it comes to augmented and virtual reality?
Sure. Yeah. It's an interesting year right now, because I think the beginning of this year, you had the release of Oculus Rift, Facebook's new virtual reality goggles. And that's definitely one of the big things. I think this year is an important year for virtual reality. I think at some point, I know there's some news that Oculus has sort of bungled the rollout and sort of delivering these goggles. But you're seeing Oculus, you're seeing HTC, Sony, Samsung. These are the sellers of VR headsets. So you're seeing some important things right now. Basically, it's the evolution of smartphone technology. It's kind of amazing that since the iPhone came about, it sort of bred all these other technologies, basically economies of scale, cheap, tiny sensors, the Moore's Law forging ahead, where chips get more powerful and cheaper every single year. So, I think we have a forecast from Deloitte, I think it was, that it was going to be $1 billion in sales for VR for 2016.
You said 1 billion?
Yeah, 1 billion. I'm trying to see if I could, but yeah, 1 billion and 1 billion. VR being a $1 billion business this year. And I think it seems right to me, sort of a blockbuster year for VR. You just saw too, Google's new smartphone specifically is built for their VR platform. So using a mobile device to put it into a headset and do some 3D video and a little bit of virtual reality. But I think you're getting to the point where people are pretty amazed by Oculus Rift goggles right now. So, and some people have even said that less than 1% of people have ever used high-end virtual reality. So, it's a really untapped, even though you read a lot about it, a lot of people haven't even used it yet in terms of how excited they might become.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've used some Oculus goggles. I've used some other goggles. I've used, you can get the Google Cardboard.
Yeah. Yeah. How was that?
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I think it's pretty, one of the benefits that you could do is the New York Times has, where you can watch, sort of a movie but you can look around the whole space as the movie goes on.
Right.
And then actually I talked to someone recently who in Northern Virginia here runs a school, and they just, in the classroom, they had kids look inside a heart for like a biology class, and the kids loved it. So you're already seeing sort of basically cheap virtual reality using a smartphone. That's already being done in schools, and already people are finding benefits from it.
So yeah, I want to talk about what this can look like. And I know it's hard because we're on the front end of the technology in so many ways. Just like when the first iPhone came out, it was hard to know what really would come with that, because who knows what people will think of and come up with. With augmented reality, people think, okay, Pokemon Go, and you kind of think of a few applications. With the virtual reality, you think heavy on the entertainment side of stuff. You just mentioned one education application. What are some of the applications you see with these technologies that would really make them something more than another way to watch YouTube?
I know. I mean, it's funny you you talk about that, but I wouldn't. There's a lot of different things, but I wouldn't be surprised of sharing sort of 3D photos, and just social media is one of the most massive applications, and it's one of the reasons Mark Zuckerberg is looking into this. But like a virtual storefront. So I want to shop around a store. I want to move around a store and look at real items and look at how I might look in sort of a different type of clothing. You could do that in virtual reality. Traveling around a museum in virtual reality, that education thing I mentioned. So traveling is huge. Traveling to different countries. Viewing, the NBA has already done this. Courtside seats at an NBA basketball game. You pay $30, $50, much less than a courtside seat, but you can watch it at home with a virtual reality headset.
Wow.
The same thing with concerts and other things like that. You could have a meeting in 3D, sort of you're with other people, but it looks like you're all together.
And are you using VR and 3D synonymously?
Yeah, VR. Well, yeah, I am. It's more. I guess it's important to make the distinction. 3D video, a lot of people say, isn't true virtual reality. You can't move around in the space. You don't have as much control, and it's not as good as full-fledged virtual reality. So there is that distinction. I'm using it similar. And then the other thing you mentioned, and you mentioned too that we've sort of had some of this before. We've had. I think I see AR and virtual reality and augmented reality as similar technologies, and a lot of investment analysts and other researchers have sort of grouped them together as this headset. Obviously, with augmented reality, you have Pokemon Go, but if you have a headset like a Google Glass that overlays digital information into the real world, so you can actually move about. Some people think in a decade or a little bit more that augmented reality will be even bigger than VR, because it's not as an individual type of gaming thing where you can actually move around the world. So although Google Glass, I kind of think it got a little bit more criticism than maybe it should have, because it was more of an experimental thing.
Totally. Yeah, I agree.
I think it's going to come back. You already see people using it on the job site, like technicians and stuff, to get some information from someone back at the office. Eventually you'll have it so it can overlay visual information on, say, an engine, so you can so a worker will know like what step to take. Or if you're a consumer, I guess it could help you sort of fix your bike by overlaying different types of information eventually. I mean, someone who knows, Mark Zuckerberg has made the forecast that in 5 or 10 years you'll see augmented reality goggles that are as good as the Oculus Rift today. So pretty good by that standard.
So like, you mean like glasses?
Yeah, glasses that you can see your world and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's my thing about Google Glass was, it looked bad, but like you said, it was really a beta rollout. And with any wearable tech, and I don't hear a lot of people saying this, but it seems so obvious to me that the number one and most important thing about wearable tech is that it looks good. The number two thing is that it does what it needs to do. The Apple Watch works because it looks good. It's not amazing. And the tech will catch up to it, will continue to improve. And Google Glass, the thing is, as soon as Google Glass can look like glasses or sunglasses, game over.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I've seen some forecasts, and I would agree with. I'm trying to find the timeline here, but eventually, whether it's sort of 2030, which is kind of far out, so it's somewhat out there, but I think eventually AR and VR could be as big as the smartphone market today, or the sort of the personal computer market. So it's a huge consumer electronic market. And that obviously helps the chip makers, the people that make sensors, the Intels of the world. You have a lot of other chip makers, whether it's Toshiba, like Honeywell, Bose, Texas Instruments, Invents, Sense, Cypress. Any of these companies that make components, they've been having a hard time. We had the PC, and then we had the smartphones. A company like Intel missed out smartphone. They didn't make mobile chips. Qualcomm, others, sort of, they one device where they can make a big, huge marketplace for their chips to go into sort of one device. It's sort of a less fragmented market is more beneficial for them, economies of scale and things like that.
Who was that again? Because the signal broke out a little bit.
Yeah, like a company like Intel.
Oh, right. Okay.
So if you can have, which I think is likely to happen, VR and AR being on the scale of smartphones today. Oh, geez, I don't even know the smartphone market. What is it, like hundreds of billions sold per year? So that scale would obviously help the headset sellers, the Oculus Rift, the Samsungs, the Sony, the HTC, and then Google will probably come out. I think Google is going to come out with another Google Glass type thing, or Alphabet, the parent company. Mm-hmm. And then one of the forecasts we had too was, I think that you'll see in 3 to 5 years, Apple unveil some type of headset. Right. That was the timeline I've been thinking about based on research and people I talked to. And I think they'll consider that a device that will obviously sell a lot. I don't think they would come out with it if they didn't think that.
Well, it seems that you talked about the scale of augmented and virtual reality as far as how big it could be, bigger than or as big as the current smartphone and personal computer market. But I mean, it makes sense that if this technology is as good as we expect it to be, and I don't really see any reason why it won't, then it's hard to imagine what form of entertainment would not include some kind of AR or VR. You know, I mean, you even mentioned live events. That's even so it seems like every single form of current consumable entertainment, whether it be on your smartphone, on a tablet, on your television, or otherwise, anything video related, any video game. But then in addition, bringing in live events to people and live experiences to people. And so it seems like that's a no-brainer, if not even bigger, which is pretty remarkable to think about.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not that hard of a leap to say people are putting smartphones right in front of their face, like when they go to bed for a long time, hours and hours. I think they'd be happy to do something that's very dynamic and very lifelike. And I think someone like a Mark Zuckerberg has said like that. It's got to be lifelike. You got to put the headphones in. It's got to feel like you're really there. It's got to have zero latency, so there can't be lag time when you're moving your head around. You can't get sick. I mean, that's a no-brainer. But it can't feel uncomfortable. I think you'll even have in the next few years sort of virtual reality arcades, which will get people used to very high-end VR. Now, Facebook mentioned last week, I think, that they're working on some untethered, so VR without a cord, because they think the future is without a cord. But right now, in the short term, I think virtual reality, the next few years, maybe 3 to 5 years, it's going to help PC makers because folks have not upgraded their PCs. They've just gotten along with their smartphones and they just don't do it. But to use VR, you need a high-end computer. I think Facebook announced something where you could use a lower-end computer, but to use full-fledged, you're going to need a computer that at least costs $1,000. So that will help PC makers in the short term, like Lenovo and companies like that. So that's another interesting thing to watch. But yeah, I think that if you can have these dynamic social media and entertainment things, it's hard to think why people wouldn't be willing to jump in.
Yeah. And so when do you see this becoming meaningful to consumers? I guess it already is a little bit, I think, again, Pokemon Go seemed to break through a little bit. Oculus rolled out this year, but you said it wasn't really taken off. And you have Google Cardboard, which was kind of a niche experimental thing. When do you see this being the type of thing where, people just like everyone has a smartphone now, it's like, well, everyone's going to have some kind of VR thing in X number of years?
I think that the Christmas season will be pretty good for these VR. Sony has one for the PlayStation, but I think that's that's be the hardcore tech people. I think in the probably 2 to 3. I think when you see what Google did with their new hardware smartphone, they said this is designed for mobile VR. I think when you see Apple do that with the iPhone, I think 40% or something along the lines of smartphones in the US are iPhones. Mm-hmm. When you see Apple promote this smartphone is built for mobile VR, you put it in a headset and it works. I think you're going to see consumers really start to use this, and then that helps the app makers, the people who do VR content in production. And I just think that could be in the next 2 to 3 years in terms of adoption really starting to pick up and having video games and being able to watch an NBA game in person. So I think that's sort of the beginning of it. So though 2016 is a pretty interesting, important year in many respects, I think it's going to take 2 or 3 years before sort of a lot of people start to have their first experience with VR.
Right. No, and it makes sense because it feels ripe for it. I remember being a kid and watching, Total Recall or different Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and then in the 80s there were plenty of different tech movies or future movies, and with the idea of virtual reality. So that term from then, but then there's been decades that have gone by of, well, whatever, that's just movie, whatever stuff. But in the last few years, it's become much more real, and it does seem, it's been a couple of years since Facebook bought Oculus Rift, but it was a big deal then, and now that they're starting to roll out, it does seem like once it does roll out, I can see that becoming very quickly a thing. And you got companies, like Apple, who, at least from a consumer standpoint, seems to be like they're really looking for what's that next big thing, either beyond the smartphone or to really up the game with a smartphone just to keep people, in the system buying new products and everything else. And I can see them hungry to roll this out as well.
Yeah, and it seems like a question of when. I think my guess was 3 to 5 years for a headset, but I do think, this could be a really big device, and they could present a lot of value. The other thing is that beyond the app makers, beyond the video game makers and the software people and Facebook and social media companies that are going to benefit from this, and the advertisers that can advertise in VR, you have a company like Magic Leap, which has, what does it have? $800 million in investment, or total funding at $1.4 billion. So this is a startup, an augmented reality startup, and no one knows much about it at all except some YouTube videos that look really cool. So you have some companies that are sort of secretive that could come out and be huge players in this. And then I haven't mentioned either Microsoft's HoloLens, another augmented reality goggles that you could say is built more for businesses, for office workers, maybe people in factories. So Microsoft has a play in this too. So you have companies like this that, it could be a really big thing. And then just all the applications that you could do with it. That's the key thing that a lot of people say. They usually say that too with, who needs super fast internet, or what are you going to do with the smartphone? The apps will follow. People
absolutely
will figure out what to do with it.
Yeah, that's where you have such a networking effect of so many people finding so many obscure, seemingly random applications, because there's so many markets and there's just so much human creativity out there. I mean, just like the App Store today, I have no doubt this will follow. And one thing that I think will be really interesting as well is I'll say pushback, and not in a negative way, but just like almost in a natural way, because it seems that anytime you have a major shift toward a new technology, there's a certain aspect of people. And again, I really don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's actually a positive thing, because it doesn't have to be one extreme or the other of, okay, AR, VR is great, but I just want to go for a hike in the mountains. You know what I mean? And want to get away. And so this isn't really part of our conversation, but whenever I talk about these things, I can't help but think, what other end of the spectrum businesses and companies could really benefit, or opportunities could be there as an alternate experience to a VR or an augmented reality. Because there's that human dynamic that I think will always ring true of wanting the real. And I think that it won't stop the AR and the VR, and I think there'll be a very real place for it, but it'll be interesting to see how all that ends up working itself out.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. I can see a cottage industry of people, say, sort of marketing their hikes and other areas as places where there's no VR or AR. Although it would be pretty cool to go on a hike or to go on a bike ride with AR glasses that give you your speed or tell you what type of tree you're looking at or what plant it is.
Well, and that's where you said earlier where AR may actually be bigger than VR. And I can see that for what you just said, because, and most people, I think watching a game courtside at home would be amazing, but I want to get out of the house, and AR allows you out of the house, whereas VR, it's kind of hard to work that out. So I could see that for sure, which would be really fun.
Yeah. And that's another thing that people talk about, the sit back and just enjoy something on VR. But one of the reasons why they think AR could be bigger is that you can be out and about. You can do it with other people. You can have fun in those ways. The other thing too, when you talk about just to quickly, someone else other entities that are sure to benefit from people using more VR to get access to the application you need for high-end VR. You're going to need a fast internet connection. So especially if this starts to take off, it's going to be good for a company like a Comcast or Verizon or AT&T or Google Fiber, sort of wired internet to the home. People needing really fast speeds, far above 100 megabits per second to tap into, whether it's real time streaming in VR or other applications. They'll need a real fast connection.
Yeah. That makes sense. Well, hey, John, this has been fantastic. Thanks again for coming on the show today and giving us a pretty thorough overview of where the AR and VR markets are, and even more importantly, where they're going and who stands to benefit. So thanks so much for your time.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the interview with John Miley. Remember, you can get full show notes with the links and other details at investinthefamily.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show at iTunes, Stitcher, or the Google Play Store. And if you want my detailed summary sheet with highlights from today's show, simply text the word Family Notes. One word, Family Notes, the number 44222, or visit investinthefamily.com and sign up, and we'll be sure to get you taken care of. This is Brian, and thanks for joining the family. The information and opinions contained on this podcast are for educational purposes only. The information does not consider the economic status or risk profile of any specific person. The information and opinions expressed should not be construed as investment trading advice and does not constitute an offer or an invitation to make an offer to buy and sell securities.